Today, I want to talk about superannuation. Now, firstly, I'm going to say I appreciate that you probably don't have vast amounts of cash sitting around waiting for an investment opportunity. And you probably have had the thought that surely superannuation is something that only old people need to worry about. But I'm here to say that superannuation is something we should be considering throughout our working careers. And whether we're employed or we're self employed, they have equal importance. Because super is a long term investment, and that's really how we need to think about it. The longer we allow the money to be invested within our superannuation fund, the better our returns are likely to be, the better our nest egg that will support us through retirement is likely to be. Now, I'm sure we all know that the employer superannuation guarantee is 9.5% of our salary, and employers are obliged to send that to our chosen superannuation fund. But what about for sole traders? Well, there is no requirement for sole traders to make any contributions to superannuation. But just because there's no requirement doesn't mean that's a good thing. So, what kind of figures are we talking about? How much do we need in retirement? Like, if you read on the internet, there's these figures kind of bandied about like $1 million, which just seems really unachievable. Now, if you've read The Barefoot Investor, Scott Pape, the author, actually recommends a much more achievable figure of $250,000 for couples and $170,000 for an individual, plus a paid off home, because then you will be able to access your old age pension, presuming you live in that home. Now, I understand there's going to be kind of a conflict between paying off a mortgage, building investments if you want it interested in shares or some sort of other investment opportunities, and paying superannuation, particularly if you're self-employed, because you then have the choice on where you want to send that cash. But we really need to think about a balanced portfolio, and we need to think about the tax deductions or the availability of tax deductions on how we invest our money. And super has one of the best tax deductions if you approach it and you do the requirements right. So when should you contribute? When am I supposed to be paying this superannuation? Well, depending on your cash flow, you may make monthly or quarterly contributions like employers do. But what I'd really suggest for small businesses is that you actually start to look at this towards the end of the financial year, so during May and June, because if you are looking at a profit in your business, superannuation is a great way to withdraw the money from the business and invest it for your long-term future. Now, what about tax then? So, Claire, you've mentioned there's potentially a tax deductibility. Well, there is, but there are a few requirements you need to follow. So, the first thing to note is if you're a sole trader, superannuation is not a business expense. You, as an individual, and the business are not separate entities. So, if you do make a contribution to super, it is a drawing of profit from the business. But that's okay because that's not where the tax deductibility starts. What actually happens is these contributions are classed as after-tax personal contributions. So if we pay more tax in our income than we would pay tax into a superannuation contribution, which is 15%, the tax officer will give us a rebate on the amount we have overpaid. Let me just go back through that. So if your marginal tax rate, so the tax rate you're paying on the profit in your business, is greater than 15%, the amount you've overpaid on the portion you put into super will be rebated back to you. Now, you do have to tell your superannuation fund that you're going to claim this deduction before you're allowed to do so, and they will need to confirm that in writing back to you. But it really is a good way to consider reducing your total taxable income, or your total tax paid actually, if you're a sole trader, and you're going to be paying greater than that 15%. Now, if you are paying less than 15%, if you've not kind of got to that amount yet, then it's still worth considering because you're thinking about this from a long-term perspective. And I'm sure at some point you're going to want to retire. I know that some people love their work, but they may not want to maintain that right through their life. I hope this was useful. If you liked the video, please comment, like, or subscribe, and I'll see you next week.